Have you been noticing strange things happening lately? Patterns and experiences that feel too perfect to be coincidences? Dreams that seem more real than waking life? Or moments of such intense emotion that you can't even tell where they came from? It can feel confusing and even unsettling when no one around you seems to get it. And I went through these experiences myself during my awakening, and I see the same thing with every client that I work with. So in this video, I'm going to break down the 3 profound experiences that only spiritually awake people go through, what they actually reveal about your consciousness, and how to navigate them so you feel more grounded and calm. One of the most mysterious parts of awakening is when you begin to notice that the outer world isn't as separate from you as you once thought. A few weeks ago, I had a session with a client who told me that he felt like life, the so-called outside world, was communicating with him directly. He said that he thought of an old friend he hadn't spoken to in years, and a few minutes later his phone rang, and it was that friend. Then a following week, he had an idea for a project, and later that same day, a colleague called him, and she said that she's been thinking about starting a new business, and it was the exact same idea that he had earlier. And he was amazed, but also slightly freaked out, and he asked me, am I somehow predicting things before they happen, or am I creating them that fast? And at some point in your awakening journey, this is what starts to unfold. Reality begins to mirror you so directly that it stops feeling like coincidence. And the more your awareness expands, the more you begin to sense that there's no real separation between your inner world and the outer one. That's what Carl Jung called the annus mundus, Latin for one world. It's the idea that everything in existence, both the physical and psychological, arises from the same underlying field of meaning. You're not an isolated observer looking at a random universe. You're part of a single interconnected system of consciousness expressing itself through matter. And when you start awakening, that veil between inner and outer, it begins to thin. And you begin to perceive the conversation that's always been happening, but you were not first aware of. And this is what synchronicity really is. It's the moment that your inner state and the outer event line up so precisely that you can feel the connection between them. It's not superstition, and it's not something random. It's not something that you can just make happen. It's resonance. The universe matching your vibration when you're aligned with truth and not when you're chasing certainty. And here's a sort of catch-22. Once you notice these patterns, it's easy to slip into obsession. So you might try to decode every license plate, every song lyric, every number sequence. And that's when meaning starts to get distorted by anxiety. You've become so inspired and assured by synchronicity that you try to create it yourself. So how do you know what's real guidance and what's projection? Here are 3 quick checks you can do to know. First, relevance over rarity. Real synchronicities touch the living questions in your life. They speak to what's emotionally active for you right now, not to random, insignificant curiosities. Think of the story that I just shared about my client. That's very clear relevance. It's not random. Second, coherence across channels. When a message is genuine, it repeats through multiple sources. A conversation, a dream, a line in a book, all echoing the same theme. One-off signs are interesting and inspiring, but coherent patterns are actual guidance. And number 3, peace response. True alignment brings a subtle calm in your body. It feels like softening. It feels like a quiet yes. If a so-called synchronicity spikes urgency, pressure, or anxiety, it's usually the ego trying to control the mystery, and it's not a synchronicity. So if you feel like reality is talking to you, it is. You're not losing your mind and you're not going crazy. The separation between you and the outer world begins to thin, and you become more aware and more in touch with the greater mysteries of life. When you start noticing meaning everywhere during the day, it's only a matter of time before the dialogue continues at night. About 4 years ago, I had a very vivid and intense dream. I was standing in an empty apartment, and the apartment was dark, white, and completely bare. No furniture, no objects, just this big empty space. In the right corner of the room, there was a really tall floor lamp, and it was facing the wall. As I began walking towards it, the light suddenly turned on, and there was this big focused spotlight from the light on the wall. As I kept staring at that spotlight, all these nasty looking bugs and insects and spiders started crawling towards it. And the closer they got to the light, the more unsettled I felt. I remember thinking in my dream, that's so gross, what's happening? This is really uncomfortable. And then I just woke up with a racing heart and feeling a little bit disturbed and freaked out. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured it was random, it was just one of those weird dreams that don't really mean anything. But then next day, during a session with my spiritual coach, I somehow mentioned the dream and we began to explore it. And what came out of that session completely changed how I view dreams to this day. The dream wasn't random at all. It was actually very symbolic of where I was in my awakening journey at the time. The empty room represented my subconscious mind, and the single light on the wall was consciousness and awareness. And all of these bugs and insects crawling towards the light, that was my fear, beliefs, trauma, suppressed emotions, all the uncomfortable parts of myself that I didn't want to see, they were finally coming to the light. And that dream stayed with me for years because it was so simple but so profound. It wasn't predicting anything, but it was revealing something quite important. And that's one big thing that people on a spiritual path, people going through an awakening experience. Your dreams stop being just random stories and they start becoming messengers and mirrors of your inner transformation. Now, of course, sometimes dreams are random, especially if you watch a weird movie or have a very impactful experience during the day. That can definitely carry over. But if you pay attention and you look deeper, there are many dreams that are actually insights. They are direct reflections of your healing, of your fears, and of your growth. And I like to think of dreams as falling into three main types. Processing dreams. So processing dreams are like emotional cleanup. Your subconscious is digesting and integrating what you couldn't fully process during the day. Especially if you're going through the facing yourself and purging phase of your awakening, you can have more of these processing dreams because there's so much that you're working with, there's so much that you're facing about yourself and healing. Processing dreams can become more dominant. Second, there are guidance dreams. These dreams hold messages, symbols, and metaphors that point you towards something that you need to see or understand about yourself and your journey. And then you have prophetic dreams. These are rare, but they are very powerful. They show you glimpses of what's unfolding or what's to come, usually when your intuition is very open and your energy is very clear. I recently actually had a session with a client who shared with me that he's been having a lot of prophetic dreams, dreaming of very vivid and super specific scenarios and situations, and then having them happen in real life. The key is to not obsess over which type of dream you're having, but to stay open, grounded, and curious about what your dreams might be revealing. And the best way to start doing that is to actually keep a dream journal. You'll notice that sometimes when you wake up in the middle of the night, you're going to remember the dream in perfect detail, but then you fall back asleep and by the morning, it's gone. You can't remember what you were dreaming about. And that's because dream recall fades within minutes unless you capture it immediately. So here's what I recommend. Keep a notebook and pen right next to your bed. And when you wake up, if it's in the morning or even when it's 3 a.m. and you remember your dream, immediately jot down anything you remember. Images, feelings, some sentences, colors, snippets of a dialogue that you had. Don't try to make sense of it right away, just record it. And if you're consistent, your recall is going to improve. And this is actually one of the foundational practices in lucid dreaming. The more you train your brain to remember your dreams and you actually jot it down, the more conscious you become within them, and also the more you can remember about them. And over time, you're going to start to notice patterns, recurring symbols, emotions, or themes that connect to what's unfolding in your waking life. And the goal isn't to interpret everything, every dream perfectly, but it's to start bridging bridges between your conscious and unconscious mind. Because when you start listening to your dreams, you're really starting to listen to yourself and what's hiding deep within yourself. But as you start decoding these deeper layers of yourself, there's one trap that can quietly sneak in, and it's easy to mistake it for growth. There was a point in my awakening about half a year in, after the initial shock and the pain, where I started kind of training myself to see things in a positive light. So I would see the lessons, and in my trauma, I was grateful for my traumas. I wouldn't get angry or upset when somebody crossed my boundaries or they tested my limits or disrespected me, and I just brushed it off. I told myself there's a reason this is happening. I would meditate and I would focus on positive feelings. And I told, whenever I felt uncomfortable feelings or anger, I just told myself it's my ego, and I just had to go and work on my ego and to transcend it. Whenever something painful would happen, I would immediately reach for a spiritual practice or an affirmation. All is good and all is well, no matter what happens, right? Well, little did I know I had fallen into one of the most common traps on the spiritual path, something almost every single one of us experiences at some point: spiritual bypass. Spiritual bypass is when we use spiritual ideas or practices to avoid uncomfortable emotions or truths. It looks like calmness and wisdom, but it's actually suppression. It's actually avoidance. It's when you use light and spirituality to hide from your shadow and your real work. And I often see it with clients who speak beautifully about trusting the universe, everything happens for a reason, I am just energy in a physical body, and it's just my ego reacting, it has nothing to do with me. But what they're doing is they're actually slowly falling into spiritual bypass. They look enlightened, positive, and like they're healing a lot of stuff, but actually they're very disconnected from their human experience. And I say it with full compassion because we all go through it. I've gone through it as well. And it's very, very tricky to navigate. Because when we awaken, we swing between two extremes. At first, we're overwhelmed by pain, grief, fear, and the shadow, and everything feels super heavy. So naturally, we run to the opposite extreme, to the positivity and light and detachment and transcendence. And we think we've moved beyond the pain. We think we've dealt with it, but not really. True awakening isn't about escaping one side for the other. It's about integrating both. Awakening integrates and bypass avoids. So you can hold light without rejecting darkness. You can feel peace and anger. You can forgive someone and still hold strong boundaries. And that's the real work. It's integration. So how do you know which side you're operating from? Awakening or spiritual bypass? Here's a quick litmus test I use with my clients. Time, body, behavior, shadow. First, we focus on the dimension of time. Awakening takes time and spiritual bypass rushes it. So if you're forcing yourself to get over it, to be healed already, if you say that you were able to release years of pain in a single session or by doing a couple of meditations, most likely you're going through a spiritual bypass. Then comes the body. Awakening brings you into your body. You feel things fully. You don't run away from the discomfort or the pain. And that's one of the biggest lessons of awakening, to begin to see and feel and process things you previously ignored. Bypassing pulls you out of your body and into your head, into ideas, philosophies, affirmations, and logically trying to heal things. But you can't do that. Then it's behavior. Awakening changes your behavior naturally and with time. And as you shed layers of conditioning, as you heal things from your past, you change your behavior and your actions. Bypassing changes your language, but your patterns stay the same. And finally, the shadow. Awakening makes you face your shadow, your pain, your fears, your judgments, your traumas, your conditionings, your strong beliefs, suppressed emotions. Spiritual bypass avoids them by saying, it's all love and light. It's just my ego. It was just my ego. It has nothing to do with me. And as you're going through a spiritual bypass, you're not willing to examine the shadow. You simply put yourself in constant light and pretend that the shadow was never there. Awakening isn't about rising above your human experience. It's about becoming fully human while staying connected to the divine. But once you start walking the spiritual path, life itself begins to test you. So watch this video next to discover the 3 hardest tests the universe gives you and how you can move through them with clarity and purpose.